All right, good morning, everybody. We are starting today with the Vishnu Mahapurana with the beginning of Skandha 4, chapter 1. Continuing with the teachings of the Guru Parashara to his Shishya Maitreya. Maitreya said, "Venerable Guru, you have explained to me the perpetual and occasional ceremonies which are to be performed by those righteous individuals who are diligent in their devotions, and you have also described to me the duties which devolve upon the several varnas and on the different orders of the human race. I have now to request you will relate to me the dynasties of the kings who have ruled over the earth." Parashara replied, "I will repeat to you, Maitreya, an account of the family of Manu, commencing with Brahma and graced with a number of religious, magnanimous, and heroic princes, of which it is said, the lineage of him shall never be extinct who daily calls to mind the race of Manu, originating with Brahma. Listen, therefore, Maitreya, to the entire series of the princes of this family, by which all sin shall be effaced. Before the evolution of the mundane egg, existed Brahma, who was Hiranyagarbha, the form of that supreme Brahma which consists of Vishnu as identical with the Rik, Yajur, and Sama Vedas, the primeval, uncreated cause of all worlds. From the right thumb of Brahma was born the Prajapati Daksha. His daughter was Aditi, who was the mother of the sun. The Manu Vaivasvata was the son of the celestial luminary, the son of Surya Deva. And his sons were Ikshvaku, Nraga, Drashta, Shrayati, Narishyanta, Pranshu, Nabhaga, Nedishta, Karosha, and Prashadra. Before their birth, the Manu, being desirous of sons, offered a yajna for that purpose to Mitra and Varuna, but the rite being deranged through an irregularity of the ministering priest, a daughter, Ila, was produced. Through the favor of the two divinities, however, Mitra and Varuna, who were propitiated for this purpose, her sex was changed and she became a man named Sudyumna. At a subsequent period, in consequence of becoming subject to the effects of a malediction once pronounced by Shiva, Sudyumna was again transformed into a woman in the vicinity of the hermitage of Buddha, the son of the deity of the moon. Buddha saw and espoused her and had by her a son named Pururavas. After his birth, the illustrious rishis, desirous of restoring Sudyumna to his male sex, prayed to the mighty Vishnu, who is the essence of the four Vedas, of mind, of everything, and of nothing, and who is the form of the Yajna Purusha. And through his favor, Ila once more became Sudyumna, in which character he had three sons, Utkala, Gaya, and Vinata. In consequence of his having been formerly a female, Sudyumna was excluded from any share in his paternal dominions. In other words, from the patrilineal line of inheritance in the line of the kings. But his father, at the suggestion of Vasishta, who suggested that this was unjust, bestowed upon him the rule of the city Pratishtana, and he gave it to his son Pururavas. Of the other sons of the Manu, Prashadra, in consequence of the crime of killing a cow, was degraded to the condition of a Shudra. From Karusha descended the mighty warriors termed the Karushas, the sovereigns of the north. The son of Nedishta, named Nabhaga, became a Vaishya. His son was Bhalananda, whose son was the celebrated Vataspri. Pranshu, whose son was Prajani, whose son was Kanitra, whose son was the very valiant Chakshupa, whose son was Vinsha, whose son was Vivinshati, whose son was Kaninetra, whose son was the powerful, wealthy, and valiant Karandhama, whose son was Avikshi, or Avikshit, whose son was the mighty Marutta, of whom this well-known verse is recited. There never was beheld on earth a yajna equal to the yajna of Marutta. All the implements and utensils were made of gold. Indra was intoxicated with the libations of soma juice, and the Brahmanas were enraptured with the magnificent donations they received. The winds of heaven encompassed the rite as guards, and the assembled gods attended to behold it. Maruta was a Chakravarti, or universal monarch. He had a son named Narishyanta. His son was Dhamma. His son was Rajyavardhana. His son was Sudhriti. His son was Nara. His son was Kevala. His son was Bandhumat. His son was Vegavat. His son was Buddha. His son was Tranavindu, who had a daughter named Ilavila. The celestial Apsaras Alambusha, becoming enamored of Tranavindu, bore him a son named Vishala, by whom the city, Vaishali, was founded. The son of the first king of the city of Vaishali was Hemachandra. His son was Suchandra. His son was Dhumrashva. His son was Sranjaya. His son was Sahadeva. His son was Krishashva. His son was Somadatta, who celebrated 10 times the Ashvamedha Yajna. His son was Janamejaya, and his son was Sumati. These were the kings of the city of Vaishali, of whom it is said, by the favor of Tranavindu, their ancestor, all the monarchs of Vaishali were long-lived, magnanimous, equitable, and valiant. Shriati, the fourth son of the Manu, had a daughter named Sukanya, who was married to the holy sage Chyavana. He, Shriati, also had a righteous son called Anarta. The son of the latter was Revata, who ruled over the country called after his father, Anarta, and dwelt at the capital, denominated Kushastali. The son of this prince was Revata, also called Kakudmin, the eldest of 100 brethren. He had a very lovely daughter, and not finding anyone worthy of her hand, he repaired with her to the region of Brahma to consult the god where a fit bridegroom was to be met with. When he arrived, the choristers, Ha Ha, Hu Hu, and others were singing before Brahma, and Revata, waiting till they had finished, imagined the ages that elapsed during their performance to be but as a moment. At the end of their singing, this is due to the time differential between Brahma Loka and Bhumi Loka, which he had not accounted for in his method of journeying there. At the end of their singing, Revata prostrated himself before Brahma and explained his errand. Whom should you wish for a son-in-law? Demanded Brahma. And the king mentioned to him various persons with whom he could be well pleased. Nodding his head gently and graciously smiling, understanding what had happened, Brahma said to him, Of those whom you have named, the third or fourth generation since them no longer survives, for many successions of ages have passed away while you were listening to our songsters. Now upon earth, the 28th Mahayuga of the present Manu is nearly finished, and the Kali Yuga is at hand. You must therefore bestow this virgin gem upon some other husband, for you are now alone, and your friends, your ministers, servants, wife, kinsmen, armies, and treasures have long since been swept away by the hand of time. Overcome with astonishment and alarm, the Raja then said to Brahma, Since I am thus circumstanced, do you, Lord, tell me unto whom the maiden shall be given? And the creator of the world, whose throne is the lotus, thus benignantly replied to the prince as he stood bowed and humble before him. The being of whose commencement, course, and termination we are ignorant, the unborn and omnipresent essence of all things, he whose real and infinite nature and essence we do not know, is the supreme Vishnu. He is time, made up of moments and hours and years, whose influence is the source of perpetual change. He is the universal form of all things, birth to death. He is eternal, without name or shape. Through the favor of that imperishable being am I the agent of his power and creation. Through his anger is Rudra, the destroyer of the world, and the cause of preservation, Purusha, proceeds also from him. The unborn, having assumed my person, creates the world. In his own essence, he provides for its duration. In the form of Rudra, he devours all things, and with the body of Ananta, he upholds them. Impersonated as Indra and the other devas, he is the guardian of humankind. And as the sun and moon, he disperses darkness. Taking upon himself the nature of fire, he bestows warmth and maturity, and in the condition of the earth, nourishes all beings. As one with air, he gives activity to existence, and as one with water, he satisfies all wants, while in the state of Akasha, associated with universal aggregation, he furnishes space for all objects. He is at once the creator and that which is created, the preserver in that which is preserved, the destroyer, and as one with all things, that which is destroyed. And as the indestructible, he is distinct from these three vicissitudes. In him is the world, he is the world, and he, the primeval self-born, is again present in the world. That mighty Vishnu, who is paramount over all beings, is now in a portion of himself upon the earth. That city, Kushastali, which was formerly your capital and rivaled the city of the immortals, is now known as Dwaraka, and there reigns a portion of that divine being in the person of Baladeva. To him, who appears as a man, present her as a wife. He is a worthy bridegroom for this excellent damsel, and she is a suitable bride for him. Being thus instructed by the lotus-born divinity, Raivata returned with his daughter to earth, where he found the race of men dwindled in stature, reduced in vigor, and enfeebled in intellect. Since he left during the early let's see, well, yes, yugas have passed since he left. Repairing to the city of Kushastali, which he found much altered, the wise monarch bestowed his unequaled daughter on the wielder of the plowshare, whose breast was as fair and radiant as crystal. Beholding the damsel of excessively lofty height, the chief, whose banner is a palm tree, shortened her with the end of his plowshare, and she became his wife. Balarama, having espoused, agreeably to the ritual, Revati, the daughter of Raivata, the king retired to the mountain Himalaya and ended his days in devout austerities. It would have been near the beginning of the Treta Yuga, from which they departed, and the very end of the Dwapara Yuga, to which they returned. Chapter 2. Parashara said, while Kakudmin, surnamed Revata, was absent on his visit to the region of Brahma, the evil spirits, the Rakshasas named the Punjayans, destroyed his capital city of Kushastali. His 100 brothers, through dread of these foes, fled in different directions, and the Kshatriyas, their descendants, settled in many countries. From Drishta, the son of the Manu, sprang the Kshatriya race of Dharshtaka. The son of Nabhaga was Nabhaga. His son was Ambarisha. His son was Virupa. His son was Prashadashva. His son was Ratinara, of whom it is sung, these who were Kshatriyas by birth, the heads of the family of Ratinara, were called Angirasas, and were Brahmanas as well as Kshatriyas. Ikshvaku was born from the nostril of the Manu, as he happened to sneeze. He had 100 sons, of whom the 3 most distinguished were named Vikukshi, Nimi, and Danda. 50 of the rest, under Shakuni, were the protectors of the northern countries. 48 were the princes of the south. Upon one of the days, called Ashtvaka, Ikshvaku, being desirous of celebrating obsequies, ordered Vikukshi to bring him flesh suitable for the offering. The prince accordingly went into the forest and killed many deer and other wild animals for the celebration. Being weary with the chase and being hungered, he sat down and ate a hare, after which, being refreshed, he carried the rest of the game to his father. Vasishta, the family priest of the house of Ikshvaku, was summoned to consecrate the food, but he declared that it was impure, in consequence of Vikukshi's having eaten a hare from amongst it, making the rest thus count as the leftovers of his meal. Vikukshi was in consequence abandoned by his offended father, and the epithet Shashada, or hare eater, rabbit eater, was affixed to him by the Guru. On the death of Ikshvaku, the dominion of the earth descended to Shashada, who was succeeded by his son Paranjaya. In the Treta Yuga, a violent war broke out between the Devas and the Asuras, in which the former, the Devas, were vanquished. They consequently had recourse to Vishnu for assistance and propitiated him by their adoration. The eternal ruler of the universe, Narayana, had compassion upon them and said, "What you desire is known unto me. Hear how your wishes shall be fulfilled. There is an illustrious prince named Paranjaya, the son of a Raja Rishi, a royal sage. Into his person I will infuse a portion of myself, and having descended upon earth, I will in his person subdue all your enemies. Do you therefore endeavor to secure the aid of Paranjaya for the destruction of your foes. Acknowledging with reverence the kindness of the deity, the immortals quitted his presence and repaired to Paranjaya, whom they thus addressed. Most renowned Kshatriya, we have come to you to solicit your alliance against our enemies. It will not become you to disappoint our hopes. The prince replied, let this your Indra, the monarch of the spheres, the god of 100 yajnas, consent to carry me upon his shoulders, and I will wage battle with your adversaries as your ally. The Devas and Indra readily answered, so be it. And the latter, Indra, assuming the shape of a bull, the prince mounted upon his shoulders. Being then filled with delight and invigorated by the power of the eternal ruler of all movable and immovable things, he destroyed in the battle that ensued all the enemies of the Devas. And because he annihilated the demon host while seated upon the shoulder or the hump, the kakud of the bull, he then obtained the appellation kakutsta, or literally seated on the hump, but essentially meaning the bull rider. The son of Kakutsta was Anenas, whose son was Pratu, whose son was Vishvagashva, whose son was Ardra, whose son was Yuvanashva, whose son was Sravasta, by whom the city of Sravasti was founded. The son of Sravasta was Brihadashva, whose son was Kuvalayashva. This prince, inspired with the spirit of Vishnu, destroyed the Asura Dhundhu, who had harassed the pious sage Uttanka, and he was then entitled Dhundhumara, the slayer of Dhundhu. In his conflict with this demon, the king was attended by his sons, to the number of 21,000, and all these, with the exception of only 3, perished in the engagement, consumed by the fiery breath of Dhundhu. The 3 who survived were Durdhashva, Chandrashva, and Kapilashva, and the son and successor of the elder of these was Haryashva. His son was Nikumbha, his son was Sanhatashva, his son was Krashashva, his son was Prasenajit, and his son was another Yuvanashva, Yuvanashva the second of his line. This Yuvanashva had no son, at which he was deeply grieved. While residing in the vicinity of the holy munis, he inspired them with pity for his childless condition, and they instituted a religious rite to procure him progeny. One night during its performance, the sages, having placed a vessel of consecrated water upon the altar, had retired to repose. It was past midnight when the king awoke, exceedingly thirsty, and unwilling to disturb any of the holy inmates of the dwelling, he looked about for something to drink. In his search, he came to the water in the jar, which, unbeknownst to him, had been sanctified and endowed with prolific efficacy by sacred texts, and he drank it. When the munis rose and found that the water had been drunk, they inquired who had taken it, and said, the queen that has drunk this water shall give birth to a mighty and valiant son. It was I, exclaimed the Raja, who unwittingly drank the water. And accordingly, in the belly of Yuvanashva was conceived a child, and it grew, and in due time it ripped open the right side of the Raja, and was born, and the Raja did not die. Upon the birth of the child, who will be its nurse, said the munis, when Indra, the Raja of the Devas, appeared, and said, he shall have me for his nurse, which in Sanskrit, the words spoken by Indra were Mam Dhashyati, and hence the boy was named Mandhatri from this. Indra put his forefinger into the mouth of the infant, who sucked it and drew from it heavenly nectar. And he grew up and became a mighty monarch, and reduced the 7 continental zones under his dominion. And here a verse is recited. From the rising to the setting of the sun, all that is irradiated by his light, is the land of Mandhatri, the son of Yuvanashva. Mandhata married Bindumati, the daughter of Shashabindu, and had by her 3 sons, Purukutsa, Ambarisha, and Muchukunda. They had also 50 daughters. The devout sage Sobhari, learned in the Vedas, had spent 12 years immersed in a piece of water. The sovereign of the fish of which, named Sammada, of large bulk, had a very numerous progeny. His children and his grandchildren were wont to frolic around him in all directions, and he lived amongst them happily, playing with them night and day. Sobhari the sage, being disturbed in devotions by their sports, contemplated the patriarchal felicity of the monarch of the lake and reflected, how enviable is this creature who, although born in a degraded or lesser state of being, is ever thus sporting cheerfully amongst his offspring and their young. Of a truth he awakens in my mind the wish to taste such pleasure, and I also will make merry amidst my children. Having thus resolved, the Muni came up hastily from the water, and desirous of entering into the condition of a householder, went to Mandhata to demand one of his daughters as his wife. As soon as he was informed of the arrival of the sage, the king rose up from his throne, offered him the customary libation, and treated him with the most profound respect. Having taken a seat, Sobhari said to the Raja, I have determined to marry. Do you, Raja, give me one of your daughters as a wife. Disappoint not my affection. It is not the practice of the princes of the race of Kakutta to turn away from compliance with the wishes of those who are come to them for succor. There are, O monarch, other kings of the earth to whom daughters have been born, but your family is above all renowned for observance of liberality nor donations to those who ask your bounty. You have, O prince, 50 daughters. Give one of them to me, so that I may be relieved from the anxiety I suffer through fear that my suit may be denied. When Mandhata heard this request and looked upon the person of the sage, emaciated by austerity and old age, he felt disposed to refuse his consent, but dreading to incur the anger and imprecation of the holy man, he was much perplexed, and declining his head, was lost a while in thought. The Rishi, observing his hesitation, said, On what, O Raja, do you meditate? I have asked for nothing which may not be readily accorded. And what is there that shall be unattainable to you if my desires be gratified by the damsel whom you must needs give to me? To this the Raja, apprehensive of his displeasure, answered and said, Grave sir, it is the established usage of our house to wed our daughters to such persons only as they shall themselves select from suitors of fitting rank. And since this your request is not yet made known to my maidens, it is impossible to say whether it may be equally agreeable to them as it is to me. This is the occasion of my perplexity, and I am at a loss what to do. This answer of the king was fully understood by the Rishi, who said to himself, This is merely a device of the Raja to evade compliance with my suit. He has reflected that I am an old man, having no attractions for women and not likely to be accepted by any of his daughters. Even be it so, I will be a match for him. And he spoke aloud, Since such is the custom, mighty prince, give orders that I be admitted to the interior of the palace. Should any of the maidens, your daughters, be willing to take me for a bridegroom, I will have her for my bride. If no one be willing, then let the blame attach alone to the years I have numbered. Having thus spoken, he was silent. Mandhata, unwilling to provoke the indignation of the Muni, was accordingly obliged to command the eunuch to lead the sage into the inner chambers, who, as he entered the apartments, the sage put on a form and features of beauty far exceeding the personal charms of mortals or even of heavenly spirits. His conductor, addressing the princesses, said to them, Your father, pious ladies, sends you this pious sage who has demanded of him a bride, and the Raja has promised him that he will not refuse him any one of you who shall choose him for your husband. When the damsels heard this and looked upon the person of the Rishi, they were equally inspired with passion and desire, and like a troop of female elephants disputing the favors of the masters of the herd, they all contended for the choice. Away, away, sister, said each to the other. This is my election. He is my choice. He is not a meet bridegroom for you. He has been created by Brahma on purpose for me, as I have been created in order to become his wife. He has been chosen by me before you. You have no right to prevent his becoming my husband. In this way arose a violent quarrel amongst the daughters of the Raja, each insisting upon the exclusive election of the Rishi. And as the blameless sage was thus contended for by the rival princesses, the superintendent of the inner apartments, with a downcast look, reported to the Raja what had occurred. Perplexed more than ever by this information, the Raja exclaimed, What is all this, and what am I to do now? What is it that I have said? And at last, although with extreme reluctance, he was obliged to agree that the Rishi should marry all 50 of his daughters. Having then wedded, agreeably to law, all the princesses, the sage took them home to his habitation, where he employed the chief of architects, Vishvakarman, equal in taste and skill to Brahma himself, to construct 50 separate palaces for each of his wives. He ordered them to provide each building with elegant couches and seats and furniture, and to attach to them gardens and groves with reservoirs of water, where the wild duck and the swan should sport amidst beds of lotus flowers. The divine artist obeyed his injunctions and constructed splendid apartments for the wives of the rishi, in which, by command of Sobhari, the inexhaustible and divine treasure called Nanda took up his permanent abode, and the princesses entertained all their guests and dependents with abundant viands of every description and choicest quality. So when we say the inexhaustible and divine treasure called Nanda, this is the treasure here is being the word being translated as this treasure is Mahanidhi, the great treasure. So there are several great treasures belonging to Kubera, god of treasures, each of which has its own personifying guardian spirit. So it was this guardian spirit, the great Yaksha, named Nanda, who took up his abode in the home of Sobhari. After some period had elapsed, the heart of Raja Mandhatri yearned for his daughters, and he left his home solicitous to know whether they were happily circumstanced. Setting off, therefore, on a visit to the hermitage of Sobhari, he beheld upon his arrival a row of 50 beautiful crystal palaces, shining as brilliantly as the rays of the sun and situated amidst lovely gardens and reservoirs of pellucid water. Entering into one of these magnificent palaces, he found and embraced one of his daughters, and said to her, as the tears of affection and delight trembled in his eyes, "Dear child, tell me how it is with you. Are you happy here, or not? Does the great sage treat you with tenderness, or do you revert with regret to your early home?" The princess replied, "You behold, my father, how delightful a mansion I inhabit, surrounded by lovely gardens and lakes, where the lotus blooms and the wild swans murmur. Here I have delicious viands, fragrant unguents, costly ornaments, splendid raiment, soft beds, and every enjoyment that affluence can procure. Why then should I call to memory the place of birth? To your favor am I indebted for all that I possess. I have only one cause of anxiety, which is this. My husband is never absent from my dwelling. Solely attached to me, he is always at my side. He never goes near my sisters, and I am concerned to think that they must feel mortified by his neglect. This is the only circumstance that gives me uneasiness." Proceeding to visit another of his daughters, the Raja, after embracing her and sitting down, made the same inquiry and received the same account of the complaint, that the rishi was wholly devoted to her and paid no attention to her sisters. In every place, Mandhatri heard the same story from each of his daughters in reply to his questions, and with a heart overflowing with wonder and delight, he repaired to the wise Sobhari, whom he found alone, and after paying homage to him, thus addressed him: "Holy sage, I have witnessed this your marvelous power. You possess miraculous faculties I have never known any other to possess. How great is the reward of your devout austerities." Having thus saluted the sage and been received by him with respect, the Raja resided with him for some time, partaking of the pleasures of the place, and then returned to his capital. In the course of time, the daughters of Mandhatri bore to Sobhari 150 sons, and day by day his affection for his children became more intense, and his heart was wholly occupied with the sentiment of self. "These my sons," he loved to think, "will charm me with their infant prattle. Then they will learn to walk. They will then grow up to youth and to manhood. I shall see them married, and they will have children, and I may behold the children of those children." By these and similar reflections, however, he perceived that his anticipations every day outstripped the course of time, and at last he exclaimed, "What exceeding folly is mine! There is no end to my desires. Though all I should hope should come to pass for 10,000 or 100,000 years, still new wishes would spring up. When I have seen my infants walk, when I have beheld their youth, their manhood, their marriage, their progeny, still my expectations are unsatisfied, and my soul yearns to behold the descendants of their descendants. Shall I even see them, some other wish will be engendered, and when that is accomplished, how is the birth of fresh desire to be prevented? I have at last discovered that there is no end to hope until it terminates in death, and that the mind which is perpetually engrossed by expectation can never be attached to the Supreme Spirit. My mental devotions while immersed in water were interrupted by attachments to my friend the fish. The result of that connection was my marriage, and insatiable desires are the consequence of my married life. The pain attendant upon the birth of my single body is now augmented by the cares attached to 50 others, and is further multiplied by the numerous children whom the princesses have borne to me. The sources of affliction will be repeatedly renewed by their children, and by their espousals, and by their progeny, and will be infinitely increased. A married life is a mine of individual anxiety. My devotions, first disturbed by the fish of the pool, have since been obstructed by temporal indulgence, and I have been beguiled by that desire for progeny which was communicated to me by association with sammada. Separation from the world is the only path of the sage to final liberation. From commerce with humankind, innumerable errors proceed. The ascetic who has accomplished a course of self-denials falls from perfection by contracting worldly attachments. How much more likely should one so fall whose observances are incomplete? My intellect has been a prey to the desire of married happiness, but I will now so exert myself for the salvation of my soul that, exempt from human imperfections, I may be exonerated from human sufferings. To that end, I will propitiate by arduous penance Vishnu, the creator of the universe, whose form is inscrutable, who is smaller than the smallest, larger than the largest, the source of darkness and of light, the sovereign God of gods. On his everlasting body, which both discrete and indiscrete substance, illimitably mighty and identical with the universe, may my mind, wholly free from sin, be ever steadily intent, so that I may be born no more. To him I fly for refuge, to that Vishnu, who is the Guru of Gurus, who is the one, who is one with all beings, the pure, eternal Lord of all, without beginning, middle, or end, and besides whom is nothing. Chapter 3. Having thus communed with himself, Saubhari abandoned his children, his home, and all his splendor, and accompanied by his wives, entered the forest, where he daily practiced the observances followed by the ascetics termed the Vaikanasas, which are anchorites having families, since he is living with his wives, until he had cleansed himself from all papa. When his intellect had attained maturity, he concentrated in his spirit the sacramental fires and became a religious mendicant. Then, having consigned all his acts to the Supreme, he obtained the condition of Achyuta, which knows no change and is not subject to the vicissitudes of birth, transmigration, or death. Whoever reads or hears or remembers or understands this legend of Saubhari and his espousal of the daughters of Mandhatri shall never for eight successive births be addicted to evil thoughts, nor shall he act unrighteously, nor shall his mind dwell upon improper objects, nor shall he be influenced by selfish attachments. The line of Mandhata is now resumed. The son of Ambarisha, the son of Mandhata, was Yuvanashva. His son was Harita, from whom the Angiras the Haritas were descended. In the regions below the earth, the Gandharvas called the Mauneyas, the sons of the Muni Kashyapa, who were 60 million in number, had defeated the tribes of the Nagas and seized upon their most precious jewels and usurped their dominion. Deprived of their power by the Gandharvas, the serpent chiefs addressed the god of the gods as he awoke from his slumbers, and the blossoms of his lotus eyes opened while listening to their hymns. They said, "Lord, how shall we be delivered from this great fear?" Then replied the Adipurusha, who is without beginning, "I will enter into the person of Purukutsa, the son of Mandhatri, son of Yuvanashva, and in him I will quiet these iniquitous Gandharvas." On hearing these words, the snake gods bowed and withdrew, and returning to their country, dispatched Narmada to solicit the aid of Purukutsa. Narmada is the god of the Narmada River, the goddess of the Narmada River, and herself a Nagini. So the Nagini Narmada accordingly went to Purukutsa and conducted him to the regions below the earth, where, being filled with the might of the deity, he destroyed the Gandharvas. He then returned to his own palace, and the snake gods, in acknowledgement of Narmada's services, conferred upon her as a blessing that whosoever should think of her and invoke her name should never have any dread of the venom of snakes. This is the invocation. Salutation be to Narmada in the morning. Salutation be to Narmada at night. Salutation be to you, O Narmada. Defend me from the serpent's poison. Whoever repeats this day and night shall never be bitten by a snake in the dark, nor in entering a chamber, nor shall he who calls it to mind when he eats suffer any injury from poison, though it be mixed with his food. To Purukutsa also, the snake gods announced that the series of his descendants should never be cut off. Purukutsa had a son by Narmada named Trasadasyu, whose son was Sambhuta, whose son was Aranya, who was slain by Ravana in his triumphant progress through the nations, the demon Ravana. The son of Aranya, before being slain, he had a son to succeed him, was Brashadashva. His son was Hariyashva. His son was Sumanas. His son was Tridhanvan. His son was Trayaruna. And his son was Satyavrata, who obtained the appellation of Trishanku and was degraded to the condition of a Chandala. During a 12 years famine, Trishanku provided the flesh of deer for the nourishment of the wife and children of Vishvamitra, suspending it upon a spreading fig tree on the borders of the Ganga, that he might not subject them to the indignity of receiving presents from an outcast. In other words, he did not give it directly to them, but left it for them to find. On this account, Vishvamitra, being highly pleased with him, elevated him in his living body to heaven. The son of Trishanku was Harishchandra. His son was Rohitashva. His son was Harita. His son was Chunchu, who had two sons named Vijaya and Sudeva. Ruraka was the son of Vijaya, and his own son was Vrika, whose son was Bahu, or Bahuka. This prince was vanquished by the tribe of Haihayas and Talajangas, and his country was overrun by them, in consequence of which he fled into the forests with his wives. One of his wives, was pregnant at the time of their flight, and being an object of jealousy to a rival queen, the latter gave her poison to prevent her delivery. The poison had the effect of confining the child in the womb for 7 years. Bahu, having waxed old, died in the neighborhood of the ashrama of the Muni Aurva. His queen, having constructed his funeral pile, ascended it with the determination of accompanying him in death, but the sage Aurva, who knew all things, past, present, and to come, issued forth from his hermitage and forbade her, saying, "Hold, hold, this is unrighteous. A valiant prince, the monarch of many realms, the offerer of many yajnas, the destroyer of his foes, a universal emperor is in your womb. Think not of committing so desperate an act." Accordingly, in obedience to his injunctions, she relinquished her intention. The sage then conducted her to his abode, and after some time a very splendid boy was there born. Along with him, the poison that had been given to his mother was expelled, and Aurva, after performing the ceremonies required at birth, gave him on that account the name of Sagara, or born with poison. The same holy sage celebrated his investiture with the cord of his class, instructed him fully in the Vedas, and taught him the use of arms, especially those of fire, called after Bhargava. When the boy had grown up and was capable of reflection, he said to his mother one day, "Why are we dwelling in this ashrama? Where is my father, and who is he?" His mother, in reply, related to him all that had happened, upon hearing which he was highly incensed, and vowed to recover his patrimonial kingdom and exterminate the Haihayas and Talajangas by whom it had been overrun. Accordingly, when he became a man, he put nearly the whole of the Haihayas to death, and would have also destroyed the Shakas, the Yavanas, Kambojas, Paradas, and Pahnavas. These are various widespread tribal peoples. But that they applied to Vasishta, the family priest of Sagara, for protection. Vasishta regarded them as annihilated though living, sufficiently deprived of power, and spoke to Sagara, "Enough, enough, my son. Pursue no further these objects of your wrath, whom you may look upon as no more. In order to fulfill your vow, I have separated them from affinity to the regenerate tribes and from the duties of their varnas." Sagara, in compliance with the injunctions of his spiritual guru, contented himself, therefore, with imposing upon the vanquished nations peculiar distinguishing marks. He made the Yavanas shave the upper half of their heads, the Paradas wear their hair long, and the Pahnavas let their beards grow, in obedience to his commands. Then also, other Kshatriya races he deprived of the established usages of oblations to fire and the study of the Vedas, and thus separated from religious rites and abandoned by the Brahmanas, these different tribes became mlechas. Sagara, after the recovery of his kingdom, reigned over the 7 zones of the earth with undisputed dominion. Chapter 4. Sumati, the daughter of Kashyapa, and Keshini, the daughter of Raja Vidarbha, were the 2 wives of Sagara. Being without progeny, the king solicited the aid of the sage Aurva, his guru, with great earnestness, and the Muni pronounced this boon: that one wife should bear 1 son, the upholder of his race, and the other should give birth to 60,000 sons, and he left it to them to make their election, which wife wanted to be which. Keshini chose to have the single son, Sumati the multitude, and it came to pass in a short time, the former, Keshini, bore Asamanjas, a prince through whom the dynasty continued, and the daughter of Vinara, Sumati, had 60,000 sons. The son of Asamanjas was Anshumat. Asamanjas was from his boyhood a very irregular conduct. His father hoped that as he grew up to manhood he would reform, but finding that he continued guilty of the same immorality, Sagara abandoned him. The 60,000 sons of Sagara followed the example of their brother Asamanjas, the path of virtue and piety being obstructed in the world by the sons of Sagara. The Devas repaired to the Muni Kalpa, who was a portion, or Kapila, who was a portion of Vishnu, free from fault and endowed with all true wisdom. Having approached him with respect, they said, "O Lord, what will become of the world if these sons of Sagara are permitted to go on in the evil ways which they have learned from Asamanjas? Do you then assume a visible form for the protection of the afflicted universe?" "Be satisfied," replied the sage. "In a short time the sons of Sagara shall all be destroyed." At that time, Sagara commenced the performance of the solemn Ashvamedha Yajna. The horse was guarded by his own sons. Nevertheless, someone stole the animal and carried it off into a chasm in the earth. Sagara commanded his sons to search for the steed, and they, tracing the steed by the impressions of his hoofs, followed his course with perseverance, until coming to the chasm where he had entered, they proceeded to enlarge it, and dug downwards, each for a league. Coming to Patala, they beheld the horse wandering freely about, and at no great distance from him they saw the Rishi Kapila sitting, with his head declined in meditation, and illuminating the surrounding space with radiance as bright as the splendors of the autumnal sun, shining in an unclouded sky, exclaiming, "This is the villain who has maliciously interrupted our yajna and stolen the horse. Kill him, kill him!" He ran towards him with uplifted weapons. Muni slowly raised his eyes, and for an instant looked upon them, and they were reduced to ashes by the sacred flame that darted from his person. When Sagara learned that his sons, whom he had sent in pursuit of the sacrificial steed, had been destroyed by the might of the Maharshi Kapila, he dispatched Anshumat, the son of Asamanjas, to effect the animal's recovery. The youth, proceeding by the deep path which the princess had dug, arrived where Kapila was, and bowing respectfully, prayed to him and so propitiated him that the saint said, "Go, my son, deliver the horse to your grandfather and demand a boon. Your grandson shall bring down the river of heaven on the earth." Anshumat requested as a boon that his uncles, who had perished through the sage's displeasure, might, though unworthy of it, be raised to heaven through his favor. I have told you, replied Kapila, that your grandson shall bring down upon earth the Ganga of the gods, and when her waters shall wash the bones and ashes of your grandfather's sons, they shall be raised to Svarga. Such is the efficacy of the stream that flows from the toe of Vishnu, that it confers Svarga upon all who bathe in it designedly, or who even become accidentally immersed in it. Those even shall obtain Svarga, whose bones, skin, fibers, hair, or any other part shall be left after death upon the earth, which is contiguous to the Ganga. In other words, just on the ground next to the Ganga. Having acknowledged reverentially the kindness of the sage, Anshumat returned to his grandfather and delivered to him the horse. Sagara, on recovering the steed, completed his yajna, and in affectionate memory of his sons, denominated Sagara the chasm which they had dug. The son of Anshumat was Dilipa. His son was Bhagirath, who brought Ganga down to the earth, whence she is called Bhagirati, the fulfiller of the prayers of Bhagiratha. The son of Bhagiratha was Sruta. His son was Nabhaga. His son was Ambarisha. His son was Sindhudvipa. His son was Ayutashva. His son was Ratuparna, the friend of Nala, skilled profoundly in dice. Son of Ratuparna was Sarvakama. His son was Sudasa. His son was Saudasa, named also Mitrasaha. The son of Sudasa, having gone into the woods to hunt, fell in with a couple of tigers by whom the forest had been cleared of the deer. The king slew one of these tigers with an arrow. At the moment of expiring, the form of the animal was changed, and it became that of a fiend, a fearful figure and hideous aspect. Its companion, threatening the prince with vengeance, disappeared. After some interval, Saudasa celebrated a sacrifice which was conducted by Vasishta. At the close of the rite, Vasishta went out, when the Rakshasa, the fellow of the one that had been killed in the figure of a tiger, assumed the semblance of Vasishta, and came and said to the Raja, now that the yajna is ended, you must give me flesh to eat, that had been cooked, and I will presently then return to my abode. Having said this, he withdrew, and transforming himself into the shape of the cook, dressed some human flesh, which he brought to the Raja, who, receiving it on a plate of gold, awaited the reappearance of Vasishta. As soon as the Muni returned, the Raja offered to him the dish. Vasishta, surprised at such want of prosperity in the Raja, as his offering him meat to eat, considered what it should be that was so presented, and by the efficacy of his meditation discovered that it was human flesh. His mind being agitated with wrath, he denounced a curse upon the Raja, saying, inasmuch as you have insulted all such holy men as we are, by giving me what is not to be eaten, your appetite shall henceforth be excited by similar food. It was yourself, replied the Raja to the indignant sage, who commanded this food to be prepared. By me, exclaimed Vasishta, how could that have been? And again, having recourse to meditation, he detected the whole truth. Forgoing then all displeasure towards the Raja, he said, the food to which I have sentenced you shall not be your sustenance forever, but only for 12 years. The Raja, who had taken up water in the palms of his hands and was prepared to curse the Muni, to counter-curse Vasishta, now considered that Vasishta was his spiritual guru, and being reminded by Madayanti, his queen, that it ill became him to denounce a curse upon a holy teacher who was the guardian divinity of his race, abandoned his intention. Unwilling to cast the water upon the earth, lest it should wither the grain, for it was already impregnated with his malediction, and equally reluctant to throw it up into the air, lest it should blast the clouds and cause a drought, he threw it upon his own feet. Scalded by the heat which the water had derived from his angry curse that he had charged into the water, the feet of the Raja became spotted black and white, and he then obtained the name of Kalmashapada, or he with spotted feet. In consequence of the curse of Vasishta, the Raja became a cannibal every 6th watch of the day, for 12 years, and in that state wandered through the forests and devoured multitudes of men. On one occasion, he beheld a holy person engaged in dalliance with his wife. As soon as they saw his terrific form, they were frightened and endeavored to escape. But the regal Rakshasa overtook and seized the husband. The wife of the Brahmana then also desisted from flight and earnestly entreated the savage to spare her lord, exclaiming, "You, Mitrasaha, are the pride of the royal house of Ikshvaku, not a malignant fiend. It is not in your nature, who know the characters of women, to carry off and devour my husband." But all was in vain, and regardless of her reiterated supplications, he ate the Brahmana, as a tiger devours a deer. Brahmana's wife, furious with wrath, then addressed the Raja and said, "Since you have barbarously disturbed the joys of a wedded pair and killed my husband, your death shall be the consequence of your associating with your queen." So saying, she entered the flames. At the expiration of the period of his curse, after 12 years, Saudasa returned home. Being reminded of the imprecation of the Brahmani by his wife Madayanti, he abstained from conjugal intercourse and was in consequence childless. But having solicited the interposition of Vasishta, Madayanti became pregnant by Vasishta in order to bear an heir for the royal line. The child, however, was not born for 7 years, whence the queen, becoming impatient, divided the womb with a sharp stone and was thereby delivered. The child was then called Ashmaka, from Ashmana, a stone, meaning like of the stone or stone-born. The son of Ashmaka was Mulaka, who, when the warrior tribe was extirpated upon earth, was surrounded and concealed by a number of women, whence he was denominated Nari Kavacha, or armored by women. The son of Mulaka was Dasharatha. His son was Ilavila. His son was Vishvasaha. His son was Kartvanga, also called Dilipa, who in a battle between the Devas and the Asuras, being called by the former to their succor, killed a number of Asuras. Having thus acquired the friendship of the deities in Svarga, they desired him to demand a boon. He said to them, "If a boon is to be accepted by me, then tell me as a favor what is the duration of my life." "The remaining length of your life is but 1 hour," the Devas replied. On which Kartvanga, who was swift of motion, descended in his easy gliding chariot to the world of mortals. Arrived there, he prayed and said, "If my own soul has never been dearer to me than the sacred Brahmanas, if I have never deviated from the discharge of my duty, if I have never regarded devas, humans, animals, vegetables, all created things, as different from the imperishable, then may I, with unswerving step, attain to that divine being on whom holy sages meditate." Having thus spoken, he was united with that supreme being who is Vasudeva, with that elder of all the gods, who is abstract existence, and whose form cannot be described. Thus he obtained absorption, according to this stanza, which was repeated formerly by the Saptarishis. "Like unto Kartvanga will be no one upon earth, who having come from heaven and dwelt 1 hour amongst men, became united with the 3 worlds by his liberality and knowledge of truth." The son of Kartvanga was Dirgabhahu. His son was Raghu. His son was Aja. His son was Dasharatha, another Dasharatha. The god from whose navel the lotus springs became fourfold as the 4 sons of Dasharatha II, Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrughna, for the protection of the world. Rama, while yet a boy, accompanied Vishvamitra to protect his yajna and slew Taraka. He afterwards killed Maricha with his resistless shafts, and Subahu and others fell by his arms. These are various demons. He removed the guilt of Ahalya by merely looking upon her. In the palace of Janaka, he broke with ease the mighty bow of Maheshwara and received the hand of Sita, the daughter of the king, self-born from the earth, as the prize of his prowess. He humbled the pride of Parashurama, who vaunted his triumphs over the race of Haihaya and his repeated slaughters of the Kshatriya tribe. Obedient to the commands of his father and cherishing no regret for the loss of sovereignty, he entered the forest, accompanied by his brother Lakshmana and by his wife. And in the forest he killed in conflict Viradha, Karadhushana, and other Rakshasas, the headless giant Kabandha, and Bali, the monkey monarch. Having built a bridge across the ocean and destroyed the whole Rakshasa nation, he recovered his bride Sita, whom the 10-headed king Ravana had carried off, and returned to Ayodhya with her after she had been purified by the fiery ordeal from the soil contracted by her captivity, and had been honored by the assembled gods who bore witness to her virtue. Bharata, his brother, made himself master of the country of the Gandharvas after destroying vast numbers of them. And Shatrughna, having killed the Rakshasa chief Lavana, the son of Madhu, took possession of his capital, the city of Mathura. Having thus, by their unequaled valor and might, rescued the whole world from the dominion of malignant fiends, Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrughna reascended to heaven and were followed by those of the people of Kosala, who were fervently devoted to these incarnate persons of the Supreme Vishnu. Rama and the brothers had each 2 sons. Kusha and Lava were the sons of Rama. Those of Lakshmana were Angada and Chandraketu. The sons of Bharata were Taksha and Pushkara. And Subahu and Shurasena were the sons of Shatrughna. The son of Kusha was Atiti. His son was Nishadha. His son was Nala. His son was Nabhas. His son was Pundarika. His son was Kshemadhanvan. His son was Devanika. His son was Ahinagu. His son was Paripatra. His son was Dala. His son was Chala. His son was Ukta. His son was Vajranabha. His son was Shankanabha. His son was Abhyutitashva. His son was Vishvasaha. His son was Hiranyanabha, who was a pupil of the mighty yogi Jaimini and communicated the knowledge of spiritual exercise to Yajnavalkya. The son of this saintly king was Pushya. His son was Dhruvasandhi. His son was Sudarshana. His son was Agnivarna. His son was Shigra. His son was Maru, who through the power of Bhakti Yoga is still living in the village called Kalapa, and in a future yuga will be the restorer of the Kshatriya race in the solar dynasty when the Satyuga returns. Maru had a son named Prashushruta. His son was Susandhi. His son was Amarsha. His son was Mahasvat. His son was Vishrutavat. And his son was Brihadbala, who was killed in a great way by Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna. These are the most distinguished princes in the family of Ikshvaku. Whoever listens to the account of them will be purified of all his sins. And that ends chapter 4 of book 4 of the Vishnu Purana, and I think that's a good stopping point for today. We will pick up with the future line of Ikshvaku, future from the perspective of this conversation between Parashara and Maitreya at the start of next time. Thank you guys all very much for coming.
Thank you. Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol. Thank you, Sunilji. Haribol. Jai Shri Krishna.